situación de quebrantamiento de la paz y la seguridad internacionales.
How can a small island threaten a nuclear superpower? That's the sharp question from Bruno Rodríguez Parrilla. Speaking for Havana, he dismantles Washington's threat narrative with simple logic. Cuba, just 100,000 square kilometers with 10 million people, versus the world's most powerful military. Rodríguez Parrilla argues there is no common-sense basis to label Cuba a strategic threat, framing the claim as a constructed narrative rather than a grounded security assessment.
Well, just imagine Cuba is a small island, 100,000 square kilometers and 10 million inhabitants. Based on what logic? What would be the common sense behind the idea that Cuba could threaten a nuclear superpower?
The Cuban foreign minister goes further, directly calling out Marco Rubio. Rodríguez Parrilla alleges repeated misrepresentation on Cuba, saying claims around the threat narrative are not accurate. This turns the spotlight from geopolitics to credibility, questioning whether the messaging from Washington reflects ground reality or a broader strategic communication line designed to justify sustained pressure on Havana.
The government of the United States, in fact, is in a position of breaching international peace and security and violating international law and international humanitarian law with respect to the Republic of Cuba.
At the center of this standoff is pressure on Cuba's lifelines. Havana points to targeted fuel shipments, strained supply routes, and economic restrictions, tightening over months. The Cuban position? This is not deterrence, but coercion. The framing shifts from national security to economic leverage, raising a larger question. Is the pressure about neutralizing a threat or shaping outcomes inside Cuba through sustained economic constraints?
The oil or energy blockade that the United States applies to Cuba is equivalent in its effects to a naval blockade, which is an act of war and genocide that subjects the Cuban population to conditions that threaten their integrity and existence and constitutes a cruel and indiscriminate collective punishment that today causes deaths.
There's also a clear contradiction highlighted by Cuba. While Marco Rubio has stated there is no oil blockade, earlier remarks from Donald Trump pointed to Cuba having no oil, no money, no anything under U.S. policy. Havana uses this gap to reinforce its argument, presenting U.S. actions as consistent pressure while questioning the consistency of its public messaging.
I ask the international community to mobilize to prevent a humanitarian catastrophe that could be imposed either by the way of arms or by the way of the energy blockade and the extreme tightening of the blockade, which also kills and causes suffering. I ask Latin America and the Caribbean to act to preserve their status as a zone of peace and avoid adverse consequences that would destabilize the region.